So, Chris, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Brilliant, brilliant. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? Who do you work for?
Okay, my name is Chris Geiser. I work for a firm called DCG ONE. I am the Chief Technology Officer there. I've been with the company in some form for 28 years. I was initially the Chief Technology Officer of the Garrigan Lyman Group, and we were acquired by DCG ONE in January of 2022.
Wow, yeah. And we were talking offline about the time. You've been there for how many years?
I had been at GLG for 25. I think we were acquired right on my 25th or 26th anniversary. So it's been a long time.
Oh, yeah.
1996, I think I started.
Wow, yeah. And I know we spoke again around your transition to this space here. So what was you doing before that?
Before that, I came out of New York Institute of Technology in the 80s with a cinematography degree. I started driving lighting and grip trucks, and then I transitioned to be an electrician, generator operator, and general lighting crew guy. And in 1995 or so, I figured out that was probably more of a young man's job.
Right.
So I went back to school to learn video editing. And what it turned out was that was right around the time that they were transitioning to systems like Avid and DVision, and it was becoming all digital. So I ended up finding out that I was better at fixing things, fixing the technology than I was at the art portion of it, which was, I was more passionate about the creative aspects of it, but I was much better at the technical end of it.
Right. Okay. So I guess that was quite a hard choice for you, a bit of a heart wrencher.
At that point, when you're a career switcher, you'll do whatever you have to do to get a foot in the door and keep moving forward.
Excellent. So where you are now, what's the problem that the company DCG ONE is solving in the market?
DCG ONE solves a multitude of problems in the market. We call ourselves a creative experience agency. We combine all of the services that you could get with a creative marketing agency with all of the firepower, let's say, of a print production and print manufacturing business. So using data-driven applications and translating that into printed artifacts, like everything from statements to, transactional print to large format for retail displays and other types of displays, AR, IR, all kinds of creative problem solving that ends up with a tangible product that you can hold or an experience that you can participate in.
Wow. Yeah. So, and I don't know much about the print industry, but it's obviously been around for a long while. So how has that evolution of technology worked out? Is it still in that process of digitizing up?
It's an interesting thing. The manufacturers are slow to adapt. They bring technology to the market that, is based on how they've done things for 20, 30 years. And
Yes.
So we have to adapt our systems to deal with those systems. But they're starting to lean in a little bit more, and it's because companies like ours push them.
Right. Okay. When you say push them, you mean this is the way we're going to be working now, or what does that look like?
We ask for things. We say, boy, it'd be great if we could do X, Y, or Z. We try to push the envelope on the possible.
Right.
And so we're trying to merge in modern technology applications or modern technology development and thinking, cloud, automation, all kinds of the things that we worked at in the agency world. We're trying to bring that to the print world.
Right. Okay. So as we all know, and many of our tech leader audience listening to this, they know change is always hard, especially the transformation leaders out there. And from my take on you, Chris, is that, you are a transformationist. You're kind of big on this, evolving things from where they are to a better place. And of course, we've got to do that as well because the industry's changing. It's an innovation storm out there. So any tips around how you go about that? How do you get people on board? You mentioned these requests to other parties.
Well, you said the important part already, which is getting people on board. That's the first thing, is understanding what the impact to everyone within what we call the domain is going to have. So if we think that something is going to impact the production floor, they're going to have to change a process. They're going to have to change the way that they've done something for, 10 or 15 years. We try to train them on that, bring that to them in a thoughtful way, and really we have to slow down and speed up. So
Right.
we have to slow down and think things through. I always think of the Guy Ritchie movies where he slows everything down for a minute, and then you see the same thing in fast motion, and that's basically how you have to proceed.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting perspective. And I imagine that people don't want to slow down. I guess that's an art in itself to get people to ease up.
Everybody wants everything now.
Yeah.
That's probably the most difficult part of the job. There was a joke that was flying around the agency. We're building the plane as we're flying it. And I always saw it as more like, I've got a car apart in a garage. I've got the radiator over here, the transmission over here, the drive shaft over here. And people are walking into the garage and saying, can you give me a ride to the shops in a half hour?
Right.
And it's sort of, well, I could, but maybe we ought to use a different car for now.
Right. Okay.
So the transitioning always has to have contingencies about what happens if something's not going to work right away. But we're changing our thinking a little bit from large sweeping change to what's the best outcome we can get to every day.
Right.
And how can you multiply that at the end of a year? How many changes you've made in a month, 2 months, 12 months?
Right. And do you have a measure of these changes so that the impact on the business or the processes? I mean, what does that look like? Is it a case of you just have a feel for this is going to make a difference and you kind of go for it?
We're counting manual processes that we're eliminating. We're counting every time somebody has to touch data. We're counting how much time people spend moving things from one place to another. And we're counting how long it takes to go end to end on a process.
Right.
And we're also, the manual touch piece, sorry to get back to that. Anytime that we want an automation type change to occur, even if it takes more time than we had hoped to develop and put in an automation in place that solves for manual work, it's a good thing.
Right.
Because then you can start using people to their best purpose, right? And not using, but people can get to working on their best purpose, better service to customers, better job satisfaction because they're not. How many times have you thought to yourself, boy, this would be the greatest job in the world if I didn't have to do these 5 menial tasks that are holding me back?
Yes, absolutely. When you said that, I totally know what you mean. These mundane tasks that tend to kind of suck the life out of you. It sucks the life out of me, some of the stuff I do. And having something to kind of automate that would be absolutely wonderful. And so where are the ideas for these transformations coming from? Are they kind of percolating up from the business or they're coming from the top down or a little bit of both?
From a technology steering team perspective, we've looked at this with some operating principles. A consultant that I used to work with named Brian Kessman, he helped me develop the notion of operating principles for a team. And you can turn that into an operating system. I think people are very high on saying the words operating system about how they run a team. And I'm becoming one of those people very quickly.
Right.
The first thing is technology for strategic alignment to the needs of the business. If you're developing technology in a vacuum, just things that don't really matter, but they help one thing or another, but they don't really help the business, then the business shouldn't prioritize those.
Right.
The next piece is preparation. We have to work with teams around the world to help us develop technology. And one of the things that we've done this year in 2024 and into 2025 is we've come up with a phrase. We say, eliminate all the shorthand. Any way that we would describe this to each other in a conference room where we use shorthand and we talk about this or that, this press, that press, this software program, we have to spell that out for our offshore partners because they're not there.
Right.
They're not in that room. They're not getting the shorthand. So it's made us much better at developing requirements and understanding what problem we're solving. And it's that kind of slow up to speed up kind of process.
Yeah.
And then taking the next step. That's the other big operating principle is having everyone take the next step. Don't stop because you're afraid to fail. Just go. Do the thing, try the thing, make some exceptions here and there with data security, whatever. But do the thing and take the next step. Don't stop. Yes.
I think that's a really important point you make there around, you mentioned the word getting it wrong or failure, because part of trying anything, failure is a byproduct of that. In fact, sometimes it's a really good sign that you're really kind of pushing the envelope on stuff. So have you got any stories around any changes that you've made and learning that kind of emerge from that?
Yeah, several. It's interesting you brought up failure because we have one operating principle that specifically addresses that, and we just call it win or learn.
Oh, wow.
So because we will fail.
Yes.
And so if we don't learn from the failure, then we really failed. But if we learn from it and create something new out of a failure, that's a good thing.
Yes.
We had a problem where we had to connect to an API for a client. This project had been ongoing for a long time, a lot of back and forth, a lot of volleyball, so to speak. And we finally got it ready for a production launch, and we put it into production, and it passed all the quality tests, and it passed all the functional tests, the unit tests. It was fine, except nobody had told the production floor that it was coming.
Right.
And so all of a sudden we had somebody on the production floor saying, I've got 3,000 fulfillment orders that I didn't have any insight into.
Wow.
And so that was one of the big things as we were starting to develop the operating principles. It was like, boy, we were really victimized by something that was completely in our control. And we've really pushed to not be victimized by things that are in our control.
Yes.
If it's in our control, we should be able to manage for that, plan for that. If it's out of our control, then we need to influence it to the point that we can influence it, and then walk away from that and work on things that we do control.
Yes, yeah. That's an interesting story there. It sounds like you did all the right things, ticked all the right boxes. I just can imagine the level of disappointment, or well, not disappointment, but damn, we did all the right things and it still didn't kind of work out.
Disappointment's always the worst part because it's based on the expectations that you set for yourself, for your clients, for the team. And when expectations aren't clear and expectations aren't met, then you have disappointment. That's the formula for disappointment, is not having clarity.
Yes. Yeah. And it sounds like a very complex system that you're working in, and being a tech leader in this space, because as you mentioned here, you got like equipment that is maybe a little bit dated, or a kind of range of equipment, just trying to build up a picture in my head, and trying to kind of interface with that. And of course, I guess, the manufacturers of those pieces of equipment are always doing updates or creating new versions of it. I see you kind of nod there. It's maybe not fast enough. Right.
I would say not fast enough. I think they're starting to develop some great software. They're starting to develop things. I mean, build or buy is always a very big decision with us. And we tend to side with buy until we decide that it can't do what we need it to do.
Right.
And so we have to look at a number of different manufacturers, a number of different software companies. Software has become a difficult thing.
Right.
Well, probably always was, but everybody's carving their niche out in the software as a service industry. And you have to pick and choose these point solutions that might help you with this problem or that problem. But as we say here in New York, you're committed and you're paying the vig on that for however long.
Right.
And it doesn't always pay off. We've made some bets on things that we look at and we go, boy, what were we thinking? We just didn't do the preparation right on that. We came up with a problem. We saw an OEM with a solution. We ran towards it because silver bullet, it's going to solve 3, 4, 5 different problems. And then 2 years later, you're looking at it and going, it didn't help at all.
Right. And how does the business kind of deal with that? Because obviously you're doing your best. I can imagine, you're going in with good intent to make that change. From the outside, somebody looking in, I'm being a techie myself, people sometimes looking into tech space just think, oh, just do that, and it will work, or turn on this number of engineers and we'll knock something out kind of thing. And how do you deal with that? What experiences you've had in that space, and what's worked for you to kind of maybe mitigate some of the problems there?
Communication, operating principle number 4.
Right.
Just making sure that you're clear about what we're running into.
Right.
The business, the board of directors, the management team here at DCG ONE are one of the best I've ever worked with in understanding how technology works, how difficult it is, and when to fail.
Right.
And they want to push forward. And so it's our job to communicate what's working, what's not working. And it's up to us also. It's our accountability to fail quickly.
Yeah. That's good.
And then
good.
Learn.
And learn. So these principles, what do you call them again? Your principles?
Operating principles.
Operating principles. And who came up with those? Are they embedded into the business, or are they stuff you've come up with?
So Brian Kessman is a consultant. He runs a business where he helps different firms with this. He helped our agency a few years ago with operating principles that would help us create agile work teams and create a flow and create a way of managing work that doesn't have a lot of planning allowable, right? So clients come in, they want something turned around fast. If they've got a bigger budget than client B, maybe they get, the best seat at the table and they get the fastest track on their project. So we had to manage all that. So he helped us create operating principles to do that. And when we, merged, we've brought some of those over to the creative agency, and some of those we just sort of refactored, to use a developer word.
Right.
We refactored them to fit the technology team at DCG ONE.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I remember the word refactoring. It's one of my favorite hobbies, actually. I used to love refactoring code, and it's interesting to hear that from a business perspective as well. So, Chris, with all it sounds like there's a lot of changes going on. I imagine they've been going on for quite a few years now, because the industry is changing and there's lots of new technology. AI coming in and various printing technologies as well, and techniques and what have you. So, how is the business dealing with the rate of change that you're implementing? Is it fast enough? Are they asking for more? Is it?
We can never change. We can never adopt fast enough. I mean,
Right.
that's just a rule of physics. That's the survival of the fittest, whatever you want to call it. But the company has gotten really good at prioritizing. So just setting and figuring out what's going to make the biggest impact fastest and what to work on first. And so we've taken a customer-centric view of that. What's going to help our customers? That's always first up. Kind of a big tie with security.
Right.
How do we make the business more secure is something that the team that works on this probably spends 70 to 80% of their day on that.
Right.
Including myself.
Wow.
So it's something that never goes away. It will only get harder, and we just have to lean into the fact that it's a thing. It's one of the ways you have to do things.
Yeah. I'm laughing because it reminds me of a sci-fi series. I don't know if you watched it, Battlestar Galactica.
I watched the first iteration of it in
Yeah,
1976.
I've seen that. The second one's really good, and the reason why I bring it into space, not just because it's a really good series, it's actually a really fantastic series. But they have a ship which is they've had to kind of de-engineer it. They had to simplify it, so not everything was connected, because obviously we had these kind of alien species, the Cylons, who were able to infiltrate the electronics. So they actually kind of dumbed it down to make it more secure, and they were using analog phones and what have you, so that it couldn't be tapped or what have you. But I have to confess, thank you for bringing this into space, because I do feel sorry for tech leaders, because security is just, as you say, it's relentless. Then there's always something happening, and you've really have your eyes on the ball.
Absolutely. It's a never-ending battle. And we're constantly looking at 3 or 4 things that we measure as our big items that we continually need to improve on.
Right. So just that we can build up a picture of what that means in your industry. So when you say security, is this people hacking in? Is it people getting access to, print media?
Well, obviously, everybody's big fear is always going to be ransomware. Or, as I heard somebody on a webinar yesterday call it, extortionware. They said that it should really be called extortionware now.
Yes.
Because we're all getting better at recovering systems, right? So if you keep good backups, a business can probably recover from a ransomware attack pretty quickly.
Right.
But that doesn't mean your data is not going to get put up on the dark web. And that's the thing.
That's the ouch. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a company local to here, actually, that got had by ransomware, and it actually went bust. The business, I think it had been going on for like quite a few years. It was quite an old business. In fact, it was called, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention this, but I'll mention it. I'll edit it out later. Knights of Old. So you can imagine it was quite an old logistics company, and that got done by ransomware. And they didn't have the systems and the ability to recover at all, and failed. So, any advice to kind of tech leaders out there of lessons that you've learned that you'd like to bring to the space around that? Because it sounds like you're really investing into it.
Yeah, I'd say the first big lesson is that if you think you're not a target, guess again. The worst security stereotype that you have to solve for is when your users say, well, who'd want to hack us? And the thing about it is, they don't care who they're hacking. They find a target, they go down the street trying doors, they find a door that's open, they're going to hit it.
Yes. Opportunists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of this opportunism is automated as well. So they're just...
And getting worse with AI.
Wow. Yes. So, I feel for you, and it sounds like you're really investing a lot of time into that. So I'm glad for your company that you're investing, and it's quite a large percentage of your time and headspace, really. Just thinking off the top of my head in terms of innovations, is there anything on the market, or is there anything coming up which is going to make that easier for you in terms of?
There's something that hits the market every day.
Right.
I won't mention any of the vendors that we rely on, because that would be giving a little bit too much away, but there are several vendors that we have to rely on every day.
Right.
And there's always a shiny penny of something that's going to do this better or that better, and you really have to do your due diligence to make sure that you're not buying a bill of goods.
Yes. Yeah. So coming now onto your leadership, Chris, how do you roll as a leader? What's your style? I'm always curious around how people lead in the space, especially for you, because you kind of transitioned from, you mentioned you worked in the kind of lighting space, and then you've worked your way up in the company.
Being on a movie crew is a little bit different. It's very it can be very siloed, believe it or not. The electric team doesn't like the grip team, the camera team doesn't like it. Like there's an old joke about, grips would throw grenades at the electricians, and the electricians would pick up the grenades, pull the pins out, and throw them back. So that taught me a lot about hard work and digging in and leaning in. The agency time taught me about problem solving and crisis management. And what DCG ONE is teaching me is how to be a better manager of people, which I will readily admit that I was not always good at. And I don't know if it's one of those things that comes with age. Like, oh God, finally he's over 55. Now he's probably going to be a better leader. But we my executive officer and I, we have a joke. We're constantly punting the Saul Berenson from Homeland image around and saying, you have this conversation, you need to be like Saul. Saul will tell you how it is and no judgment. It's just, this is the problem we're solving.
Right.
Get to it. And so we put a structure in place where we're trying to enable our team to fly. Just saying, you've got permission to take off and fly. Work with anyone else in the company to build a bridge, and then report back. Bring your results back. We want to know how it's going, but we don't want to stop you from doing anything. There's some full stops around data, and those kinds of things, but I'm trying to change my style to adapt to having other people take the big stuff, and I'll take the portfolio. And I've always been more of a micromanager and a control freak than I'd like to admit to, but I'll admit to it.
Yes. I guess that's the first step, isn't it? I have to confess, I hear that description in myself as well. I have been, I think it's a kind of culture of leadership that we've been exposed to and also taught to, be like. So what are your tips around not doing that? Is there a reminder? Is there something you design in the space that prevents that or mitigates it?
I think what prevents that is it's a lot of introspection. You have to ask yourself, am I doing it again? Am I being that guy, or am I being am I being a person that I would be proud of? And it's not always hard to make, it's not always easy to make the right decision about those things, because you feel like you have to get in there and dig. Sometimes I jump in and I handle 5 or 6 IT help desk tickets. I'll just do it. And the team will look and go, why is he, helping people reset their password? Or, and it's because I want to know what's going on.
Right. Yes.
It has nothing to do with my capability, has nothing to do with me saying I can do it better than you. It has everything to do with, if I solve 5 tickets this week, that means I had my finger on the pulse of what's going on. And I contributed to the success of the business at the same time.
There's some wisdom in that, though, having your finger on the pulse and knowing what's happening and just thinking, what's the better design? What's the version, 2.0 of Chris around that allows you to have your finger on the pulse without being in the weeds, so to speak?
Well, we're finding it now. A few years ago, when I first got promoted at GLG, I went to my brother-in-law. He was a battalion chief in the New York City Fire Department. And I asked him, I said, your first day as a lieutenant or a captain or a chief, how do you not get how do you fight the urge to climb the ladder and go through the window? And, of course, he corrected me and told me that it's a lieutenant's job to go through the window. But he said, when you realize that things aren't going your way, you can provide your input on what to do differently, but you have to know that you have to have your eye on the big picture. And that if you get mired down in one single detail that you think is going wrong, then you're take your eye off the big picture and something's going to go wrong over here. And he told me that when he made captain, they took him, the whole captain class, out to Randall's Island, and they had a bunch of Harvard MBAs teach them, how to speak to the press and, how to do different things. And he said, he always jokes when we're working on a house project or something, he'll say, "Oh, well, we're making significant progress in meaningful areas." And he said, I love that phrase. You can say significant progress in meaningful areas to channel 2, and you can say meaningful progress in significant areas to channel 4. And it sounds like you said 2 things.
Right.
So without saying anything.
Wow.
But at the same time, it was a valuable lesson in how not to micromanage. I got a little better after that, but I still, I insist on being on launch calls. I insist on doing things that,
Yes.
probably I can sit out, but I have a great fear of anybody ever feeling like I'm sitting out.
Yes. Yeah. I hear you. And I guess this is the art of leading is to knowing when you're doing, everything comes from awareness. You have to be aware what you're doing, wake up to the acts that you're in, and be able to kind of step back and readjust and what have you. But yeah, I can imagine that's, this is where I love the saying, being in the weeds. When you're in the weeds, you can't see anything other than the weeds. You can't see that bigger picture, which fits into what you described there.
Yeah, it's knowing when the weeds are the problem, though. If the weeds are the problem, then that's the problem to solve today, and that's where it gets really blurry.
Yes, yeah. So, as a leader, what's the biggest thing in your space that really, you kind of mentioned security. I guess security is going to be the big one. From a transformation technology perspective, what's the thing that plays on your mind, and it's where you bring your creativity to the most?
I would say system performance and I'm not somebody that can open a code window and start writing. I just can't do it. But I am someone that can put building blocks together and say, here's a blueprint for you. Tell me where it's wrong, and then go and do this. But here's the objective of what I just put on this blueprint, and this is what I think it should do. And I usually go at those things with performance as the number 2 thing, right behind security, and then scalability. So how big do we need it to get? If 500 people came, what would happen? If 1,000 people came, what would happen? When do the lights flicker? When do they dim? When do they go out?
Yeah. Excellent. And in your space at the moment, well, in the tech space, we're in January 2025, and AI has been in the space for quite a while now. There's been some pretty big steps, and there seem to be even bigger steps happening right now. It's all in the news, it's all over the place. How's that impacting your job or your industry?
I think we're trying to figure out what it's good at. There are things that, it doesn't write code well, right? I mean, you can write a piece of code if you're really explicit about what you need this one thing to do. Like, I've used it a couple of times to write batch files. And it could put Stack Overflow out of business, because you can hunt around for Stack Overflow for something that you want to do, just a small automated task, and you'll spend 4 hours before you get it right. But if you go to Claude or OpenAI and you say, I need a batch script to do this, and if you could also create a log of how it did this and when it did this, that'd be great. And you get a batch script, and usually it works the first time. Now, if you ask it to write a file upload tool, you might be a little bit more out of luck. I've actually asked it to generate spreadsheets that have different features in them, like conditional formatting, whatever else. It can't do it. I mean, maybe it's me. I'm willing to say that it could be me, but it's been hit or miss on some things. But of course, from a leadership perspective, we're looking to find out how much more it can do. Like, when can we get rid of some of these things that are really time consuming and awful, and have a machine do them?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just understanding what it's good at, and right now I'm not sure what that is. I've used it for a few things that I was really happy with. Creating different document layouts and document templates, and what should I include in a document that I want to tell somebody about this or that. And it's really helpful. But you have to be careful about what you're sharing with it, and you have to be careful about where that's going to end up. So the paid models are a little bit better for that. We're making extensive use of things like Copilot. So record every meeting, get better notes that anybody could take in a month of Sundays, and then have a transcript of exactly what was said, hey, Copilot, what were the action items for that? And yesterday I did a search in Copilot where I said, please give me every action item for all my meetings for the last 2 weeks. And it gave me a really nice list.
Wow. Yes. That is pretty groundbreaking. Do you remember the days when we used to have, whenever we managed it, a meeting chair, don't need that anymore now. It does it perfectly,
Yeah, exactly. We used to take turns taking notes in steering meetings.
Yes. Yeah. I guess as that industry evolves, the kind of fluidity of how we lead in the space and how we have these meetings, how we communicate, I can imagine there's going to be layers of innovations on that to be able to communicate to the people that need to know about certain things and summarize them at different levels.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things that we're going to see gradually and then suddenly is what Satya Nadella is talking about right now, about how software as a service is dying and AI agents will be the answer. And I'm sort of picking that apart. I have a friend who's a data scientist, and he doesn't see it exactly the same way that I do, but I think to myself, boy, for an API call, instead of having a RESTful service that's always updating itself or transmitting data back and forth, with an AI agent, I could actually ask another system in real time what the update is and have that agent display it in a certain way. So the question is, who's building those agents? Who's good at that? You look at LinkedIn and everybody's suddenly an AI expert. I get probably 3 or 4 invitations a day from people that are AI experts, and it's just sort of like, all right, so what you're saying is that you know slightly more than I do. So expertise is a relative thing in that area, I think.
Yeah, it's going. Yeah, I've seen it as well, and I do question it. Some people are very convincing and what have you, but I guess for organization, you've got to embrace it. The fact that this is changing, and it sounds like you're doing some nice innovations around that, using it as best you can, and kind of feeling your way forward. I'm still working out what works for me, but to be honest, I love the fact that I can kind of interact with it. It seems like I've got somebody to talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've actually used it that way a couple of times myself. I've used it for a couple of management problems, believe it or not, where I say, what's the right way to start this conversation? And it's embarrassing that, a grown man or a grown person has to say that. But sometimes a situation presents itself that you think, well, this is awkward. I don't know what to do here.
Yes. Yeah. And it allows you to have that bouncing of ideas without. I actually have seen some AI implementations where they've got different. So, for example, there's one for Buddha. You can ask Buddha, and I think what it does, it picks up the wisdom of the Buddhist philosophy and uses that as a kind of lens to look through and reply back. So, and to be honest, it's actually really quite good. So lots of things changing, and it's interesting where this all will go. So, Chris, as we kind of come to the closing arc of our time together, I want to ask you some questions around generally about your leadership. What were the key points in your journey in leadership that, you'd like to share here and as advice to our aspiring tech leaders listening to this?
I'd say best lesson is let experts be experts. When somebody's got an expertise in an area, listen to everything they have to say about that area and then lead them into how that helps the business. So when you start with not trying to be the expert at everything, which for a long time I suffered from that problem of trying to be the expert on everything. But if you can call in experts and say, we need an expert in how this is done properly, then you're going to win. The second thing is let your people say no to you. Actually, that might be the first thing. It's part of letting experts be experts too, but when your people say, we had a great thing, we were going to go down the road of this one software platform, and one of the top people on my team, she came to me and she said, I think we're just spending a lot of money here, and I don't think we have sufficient preparation to take this on right now. We've got other stuff we got to fix. And she says, why don't we focus on fixing those things? And we did. And it was a little bit of a blow to my ego to say, wow, I thought I had this great idea. I thought this was going to be this great thing. But the fact that I hadn't signed the contract meant that I had a lingering doubt. And she thought, I think rightfully so, I better jump on that or he's going to do something he's going to regret. And 10 years ago, I had an experience very similar where I didn't listen to the people that were advising me not to do that or advising me to slow down. And it was catastrophic.
Wow.
Catastrophic. Almost cost me my career in this business.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a biggie. It's a biggie.
Yeah.
I think the art of slowing down is really important, especially in a space where everything's speeding up. It's kind of pulling you in a rate of change and rate of everything, to slow down and to kind of take a breather and reflect.
Slowing down is the thing. I've got I don't even know what they call it these days, the hyper ADHD. I've got all that.
Right.
And the slowing down, the taking a beat. One of the jokes we use is, nobody's going to lose a kidney if this doesn't launch today. And if you start there, work your way back and say, what do we have to do to make it successful? It gets a little bit better. And then, of course, sometimes you need things fast. Fix it. It's broken. Fix it.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that reminds me of some experiences where we had a lot of pressure to speed up. And I remember code being launched and we were wincing while, that's not a good thing to be doing when you're launching something. You got to have an air of confidence. And it was just the fact that we had so much pressure on us. It was, we were doing stupid things to get it out of the door, lesson learned there.
Deadlines will drive a lot of crazy behavior.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a lesson to our tech leader audience out there, really try to give space to stuff, because you're going to end up spending a lot of time fixing this stuff. If it goes horribly wrong, all that time you've saved, it's not always worth the risk. So, Chris, any books? I always like to ask this because I'm always curious as to what books you've read that I've read. Anything that you'd like to share here that you think,
Yeah, I've been diving deep on Stoic philosophy, so the whole Ryan Holiday catalog. I just picked up a security team operating system. I forget who wrote it, but the first 10 pages were exactly what I needed to be reading, and will help me further this leadership style that I'm trying to develop. But the Stoic thing is really a key in the whole slowing down, listening, nobody's going to lose a kidney. That whole process, the Stoic thing has been wonderful.
Yes.
Then fiction. I haven't, unfortunately, been reading much fiction. My subscription to Cream magazine came back, and so I've been reading a lot of that.
Oh, good,
So
good, good. On the Stoic stuff, I read quite a lot on that. I've finished, I think it was like mid last year, Ego is the Enemy by Ron Holland.
that's a great one.
That's a really good one. I think that's a really good one for everybody because we've all got an ego. I know I've got one, colossal one, and it allows your mind's eye to see it. You know when it shows up because it's not you. It's a tool of you which is taking over, and I find that quite enlightening. What impact did it have on you?
A lot of what we just discussed.
Yes.
It was funny as I mentioned that what we were doing today to my wife, and I said, my ego's still big enough to want to do this.
Good. There you go. It has a use. It has a use.
Yeah.
It has a use. So that's great. So Chris, I'm going to offer you a wish from the tech genie. Okay. What would you wish for your leadership, for your industry, for your people?
More time.
Nice. Yeah. I think I'll join you on that one. I'm going to make that one come true just for myself. That's excellent.
Yeah, it was tough to think about. There's all kinds of things I could wish for, but more time is really the killer app.
And that kind of fits into the kind of slowing down thing as well, because time is such a rare commodity. Everything just is such a rush. We very rarely, slow down just to see things as they pass, and so yeah, I'm gonna work on that wish for you there. And your final key takeaway for our tech leader audience, what would you leave as a parting gift?
Preparation, slowing down, taking the next step, and then being clear with expectations, developing clarity around expectations, whether that be deadlines, functionality, anything that you're trying to put forth, any kind of gain, set expectations right. Probably the people that watch this don't need to hear under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
But you have to remind yourself of that because back ego is the enemy. Over promising is one of those things that comes from ego.
Yeah. Always bites you.
Yeah.
A wise note to finish on, Chris. Thank you for being on CTO Confession, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Take care. Take care.